Yeah. Mhm.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to today's Teaching and Learning Committee meeting. I'm going to give it just one more minute. We're going to wait for a few more people to join us today. Thank you. Dr. Judkins, is there anyone for public comment today before we get started?
Not at this time, but I'll do one more check just to make sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
I want to give it just another minute to see if Dr. Lallinger will be able to join us.
And there's no public comment today.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Oh, welcome, Commissioner Ames Messenger.
Thank you for
Nice.
letting me visit today.
No problem. Okay, I thought I saw Dr. Lallinger.
Yes, he's
I'm
on.
here.
Okay, great.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. All righty, we'll get started. Good afternoon. This is Committee Chair Kalila Slater Harrington. I would like to welcome you all to the April 1st meeting of the Teaching and Learning Committee. If you have not already done so, please mute your phone. Anyone who does not mute your phone may be muted by the call moderator or removed from the call. Additionally, please turn off your camera if you are not a board member or the CEO and her staff. I will now read a roll call of the board to identify who is present. Please identify yourself first before speaking for the record. Commissioner Kenyatta Bay.
Kenyatta Bay, present.
Commissioner Redding Lallinger.
Reading Lounger, present.
Commissioner Emily Ames Messenger.
Ames Messenger present. Thank you.
All righty. Members of the public who would like to provide comment to this committee can do so by signing up the day of the meeting until the start of the meeting at 3:30. I'll get into a little bit more of that, but let's jump into the meeting. We've got a lot to do today. And while April 1st is known for pranks, there's nothing foolish about the work that we have to do here in education today. As we have a full agenda focused on early learning, operator renewals, and tons of procurement, I wanted to highlight that today, April 1st, marks, let me read it correctly, the first public school library in the U.S. opened in 1833 on April 1st, reinforcing the importance of access to early learning resources. Today, we continue to prioritize literacy and foundational skills in early education. And so it is fitting today that we have an early learning update. So with that, I will go ahead and open up our meeting and turn it over to our team. I'm not sure. I did not see.
Crystal Francis is here, so she's going to do the first presentation on early learning.
I didn't see her. That's who I was looking for. Thank you.
I just popped in.
Okay. Thanks so much.
All right. I'm just checking if anyone else will be sharing my slides or if I should share them.
Hey, Crystal, it's Jonathan. I can share if you need me to.
That would be perfect, Jonathan. And you have to share with your sound on. I learned during the test run for this.
And I appreciate that reminder. Give me 1 second.
Mhm. Thank you so much.
Well, Crystal, those are lovely glasses.
Thank you so much. I was just looking like, oh, I should have wore a bigger earring for this meeting. It's fine.
I mean, the glasses are giving. I don't know if you want to over accessorize, you know?
You're right. You gotta, it's called balance.
It's balance. It's balance.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining with us today. My name is Crystal Francis, and I am the Executive Director of Early Learning Programs, and we are very excited to present an update to our Teaching and Learning Committee on all of the work that's been going on in the Office of Early Learning. Next slide, please. So here's our agenda today. We always, of course, want to ground ourselves in our goals and priorities. The key performance indicators for the work that we're doing here in early learning, provide a bit of an update on our pre-K HQIM, which is our high quality instructional materials, talk a bit about our students with disabilities, provide some updates on our Maryland's Blueprint for the Future, and then just some of the next steps as we are looking ahead within our office and our team. Next slide. So these are the strategic priorities of the work that we do here in the Office of Early Learning that align with our board priorities. I'm sure we are all familiar with this, but of course, what we aim to do in the Office of Early Learning is really to ensure that we have access for our students, that we're providing rigorous instruction as we are setting the foundation for all of our littlest learners. Next slide. And of course, we have our district goals. These are our 4 goals that we have all seen. It is very important to us that we can see our early learning and our pre-K students represented in all of these goals. And so that is a very big part of the work that we want to ensure that we are working on now so that we can prepare students for the future. Next slide. We also have our portrait of a graduate here as well, which sometimes is hard for us to see when we are thinking about young children. But we know that when we are thinking about these competencies, that we also want to make sure that we are establishing this when our students are young with us. So it's very important that we also are making sure that this is reflected in our early learning classrooms as well. Okay, so this is our favorite slide and one of our really big highlights, but our kindergarten readiness this year is at the highest rate since school year 15-16. And so we are just over the moon by the results and what we're seeing for our students, the time and the dedication from our pre-K teachers, and really setting the foundation for how our students are going into kindergarten and really ensuring that they are prepared so that we can continue to see that success as they go through all of their school year. So I'm very excited to see that, and really just, again, want to give a very big shout out to all of the work that happens in the pre-kindergarten space, and even in the 3-year-old and the 2-year-old and all of those spaces, because that is why we are seeing such tremendous growth in our kindergarten readiness today. Next slide. As many of you will recall, we have a new high quality instructional material this year in pre-K. It is called Frog Street. And so there you will see Fanny the Frog, who is beloved here within Baltimore City Schools. On the left, you'll just see some of the reasons why we chose this curriculum. It was comprehensive, high quality. There are thematic units that students are really able to enjoy. It's very important for us that students are experiencing play while they're in pre-K, while they're also learning. It's developmentally appropriate. It has inclusive strategies as we're also thinking about our students with disabilities, and also includes conscious discipline, which is a curriculum that focuses on social emotional learning. And so we have a video from one of our teachers, one of our veteran teachers, just talking about her appreciation for Frog Street. And if it doesn't play, that's okay. Okay, well, let me tell you what she said. She said that this teacher has been in our system for many, many years, and really just talked about how much she appreciated all of the things that she was able to do and to learn with Frog Street. She is able to see her students actually being able to learn through play, which has been very important to us, and really one of the tenets that we wanted to make sure that all of our teachers understood. And so I think it's always a great indicator when you have your vets who have been in your system for a long time, who have been teaching various curricula, when they are invested in something new. I think it really speaks to the high quality curriculum. Next slide.
Crystal, give me
Yes.
1 minute. If I pop out of presentation mode, I might be able to get it from the original deck.
Okay.
While we're waiting, I'll say that my 4-year-old has been out for the last 3 days and that she's been talking about since Saturday that Fanny Frog would be welcoming her back. So thank you for getting us through the dark days.
There you go. She absolutely will. And I'm sure they're singing all of the welcoming rituals when she comes back to school. Because one of the things that they do is every day talk about the students who are not there, and kind of their care for them, even when they are not in the building. So it really does create a classroom community. And you can see that when you go into the classroom.
I'm going to try one other thing. Crystal, I apologize. I'm not sure.
That's quite
Why
all
it's-
right. And we can definitely make sure that we share it, and I'll share the sentiments from that teacher as well. Thank you, Jonathan. All right, so for our year one focus, we've really been focused on fidelity and implementation with fidelity. We have spent a lot of time in our schools with our teachers and with our school leaders doing walkthroughs. Frog Street has provided us a lot of checklists and really ensuring that we are kind of seeing the change occur within our classrooms. We have a new assessment that has accompanied the curriculum. It's called Cognitive Toy Box. So we are now holding weekly office hours for teachers or school leaders to be able to log on in case they have any questions. And this spring, we actually had fidelity coaches that came from Frog Street into some of our classrooms to really support the learning with some of our teachers, particularly our teachers who we want to really see as becoming future teacher leaders. We wanted to provide them with a bit of extra coaching as they are kind of closing out this year so that we can really utilize them in helping to support their fellow teachers for future school years. So for year two, we want to continue to look into our small group instruction. So much of what happens within Frog Street happens during small group time. So we want to make sure that we are really refining that conscious discipline, that social emotional component that we talked about, really wanting to pair our own city schools teachers as co-facilitators for professional learning. Teachers really do learn best from other teachers. So we want to make sure that even as we are at the end of year one, that we can find some of those rock stars and superstars. And also, how are we focusing on our students with disabilities and our students who just need a little different ways of learning? How are we ensuring that they can see themselves reflected in this curriculum as well? Next slide. So, speaking of our students with disabilities, we have seen a tremendous growth in the number of students who have been identified as having special needs since the pandemic. There are a lot of factors that are contributing to this, lots of social factors, societal factors, lots of things. And so you will see here at this table where we were kind of when we returned from the pandemic in school year 21-22, and the number that we are where we are right now, which we are almost, we have just kind of crossed the threshold of over 600 students who have been identified as having special needs. Next slide. So with our students with disabilities, we really want to ensure that we are providing a strong foundation again. So early intervention works, and so we want to make sure that we are doing the best we can for our kiddos now. So we are always making sure that we have inclusive opportunities for our students. This year, really focusing a lot on total communication. And this is really kind of a method in which you use lots of different communicative efforts for students with disabilities. Sometimes you have students who have low communication or no communication, but it really is incumbent upon the school teams and the teachers and the classrooms to ensure that they are finding ways for those students to communicate. Really wanting to refine our student placement and transportation protocols, wanting to ensure that we are keeping our kiddos as close to home as they possibly can be. And of course, if they are able to be educated within their zone school, making sure that we have supports and services for that. Continue professional learning for our staff, obviously learning a new curriculum and trying to figure out how to do that new curriculum for students with disabilities. We're going to continue with that for our next school year and doing a couple of boot camps where we're bringing all of our teachers together, our teachers and our paraeducators, so that we can continue to extend that learning. Making sure that we're being really clear on making our determinations for ESY, that's extended school year. So some of our students will qualify for still being able to receive services during the summertime. So we want to make sure that we can make those decisions really well and that we're supporting that. Our IEP goal writing, our IEPs are really what is driving a lot of the services for our kiddos, and of course, behavioral supports for our students. Obviously, with an uptick in the number of kids that we are seeing, we're also seeing an uptick in the number of behaviors. So want to make sure that our teachers and our paraeducators in our schools are well equipped to be able to support our students. Next slide. Okay, so a bit about Maryland's blueprint for the future. So pillar one is early childhood, and it's number one because we're the best. That is science. Next slide, please. So first we have our Judy Centers, of which we love our Judy Centers here in Baltimore City. We have 14 centers within Baltimore City. We have the most of any LEA within the state. And so even as we look at the KRA scores of our Judy Centers, students who are in our Judy Center pre-K program are 28.1% more likely than peers who did not participate in Judy Center programming to demonstrate readiness on the KRA. So it just continues to show the investment that we are making in our kiddos when they are 0 to 5 really does pay off. And the investment that we are making in our Judy Centers continues to pay off for us. So for this year, we are focusing on engaging our 0 to 3. Want to make sure that we're getting students before they even come into school, what services we're providing there. Of course, supporting with our pre-K enrollment, so ensuring that we're getting students into school. Making sure that we're monitoring those grants. We rolled out a new database this year so that we can ensure that we are tracking our data and tracking our students and making sure that we're being responsive. And this year, all of our Judy Center staff began facilitating play groups for families. And so we have a really robust network of play groups that happen in all of our Judy Centers pretty much every single day of the week. Next slide. We are continuing to plan for Judy Center expansion. So we're very excited about this. We actually received a grant from Baltimore Community Foundation to support us in providing a Judy Center boot camp. So we did a boot camp this school year, and we have 3 schools that are participating. We received really, really wonderful feedback from MSDE from the state of Maryland on our boot camp program. They're actually asking us to present to other LEAs within the state about how we've done this program because they were so impressed by it. And so we are, with the help of the Baltimore Community Foundation and this grant, supporting that boot camp and really getting our schools ready to go to apply for the grant for next school year. We're also hoping to add in an expansion coordinator. So it's another Judy Center coordinator who can help us with and keeping an eye on expansion. And the state of Maryland has asked us to really look and focus in on West Baltimore in the future as we hope to do our expansion mentioned. So here you just have a picture of one of our boot camp schools, really just digging in, working through the different pieces of the grant. And this is all just in preparation for getting them ready to apply for and then hopefully to receive a Judy Center for next school year. Next slide. One of the other pieces of the Pillar 1 is for pre-K paraeducators. By school year 27-28, all of our pre-K paraeducators are required to have an associate's degree or child development associate certificate. This is really to ensure that we are providing just high quality instruction to all of our students. And in pre-K, we have a teacher and a paraeducator in our classrooms. And so we want to make sure that our paras are also high quality. So we have established a partnership with the Community College of Baltimore County, and they have done a really wonderful job of working with our paraeducators, whether they have a high school diploma or whether they have some college credits, to really help them kind of design a pathway that will allow them to either attain their AA or their CDA by this date. We've also sent out a survey to all of our existing pre-K paraeducators, because we do have the opportunity to kind of grandfather some folks in if they have about 5 years of experience being a pre-K paraeducator. It's a one time that we can do it, so we want to make sure that we are capturing as many folks as possible and continuing to support them in this pathway. Next slide. So next we have our pre-K mixed delivery system, and this is really a process by which a system that allows families to choose between a public or private pre-K setting. It really is about families having choice in whatever setting makes the most sense for them. And so the state has a target for this year that they wanted all LEAs to have about 10% of their seats dedicated to pre-K private providers. We moved from 6% last year to 9% this year. So we were very close to making it. No other LEA in the state made it. So every LEA actually had to ask for a waiver. But we are continuing to work. We have a mixed delivery work group that meets monthly that is led by the Baltimore City Early Childhood Advisory Council. And so it's made up of lots of folks from Head Start, city schools, our Judy Centers are there, childcare providers, we've got funders, and lots of folks who are at the table really trying to think about how we can work toward mixed delivery, how we can increase the number of seats for our kiddos in Baltimore City, and how we can just increase overall outcomes for all of our students. Next slide. So pre-K enrollment is open right now. It opened on March 3rd. So we are very excited. Last year, we rolled out a new centralized pre-K enrollment system as part of the blueprint. So in collaboration with the Office of Enrollment Choice and Transfer, our partners, we were able to bring on one dedicated centralized pre-K enrollment specialist. While we think enrollment just happens kind of in the springtime, it actually is a year-round occurrence. So we wanted to make sure that we were staffed and prepared to receive students, and we were able to centralize lots of those decisions, and students were offered placements based on lots of different factors. So we were very excited that last school year we had about 1,400 applications that came through in our first round, and 90% of our families were able to match with their first choice. So we're very excited about that. We are in year 2. Go to the next slide. So we really wanted to work on some refinements and improvements for this year. So here you will see we have one application window this year. It's March 3rd through April 16th, but all of that is in an effort to make sure that families are notified earlier. We heard from families that that was really important, so we want to make sure that that happens. We really wanted to be more thoughtful and intentional on refining our school selection. We also heard that sibling priority was very important, so we wanted to include that in there as well. We have really wonderful and lovely enrollment booklets that even let you know approximately how many seats are at your zone school. So families have a bit more understanding of the likelihood that they'll be able to get some seats at their schools. And really wanted to have a stronger relationship with our private providers who can serve full 3-year-olds and full day seats, so that we can really ensure that even our 3-year-olds are still able to have access to high quality seats as well. Next slide. All right, so we are wrapping up, but just want to talk about what's on the horizon. Just a few things are on the horizon for early learning for next year. Next slide. So we will be rolling out a new kindergarten readiness assessment next school year. For those who don't recall, MSDE actually stopped using the KRA at the end of last school year. City schools still continue to use it this year because we really wanted to ensure that we were still measuring the progress for our kindergarten students. MSDE has now announced there's going to be a new KRA assessment. So we will be implementing this in the fall 2025. It's got literacy, math, and some social emotional questions. It is a computer-based assessment, so it does require a laptop or a tablet, and students can answer using either a touchscreen or a keyboard or a mouse. So this assessment will open up on the first day of school and go through October 10th, and that's the same dates that we did our previous KRA. So MSDE will be facilitating a webinar for our teachers in August. So we will ensure that all of our kindergarten teachers get trained up in that, and it will be able to provide some real-time data for our teachers in a bit of a different way than KRA did. We weren't able to get data kind of right away, so we're hopeful that we'll be able to get more real-time and actionable data as soon as we do the assessment. Next slide. And then finally, we've got Camp Curiosity, which is our wonderful summer program. This was born out of recovery from the pandemic and really wanting to ensure that we provided our students the more opportunities. And so we are going into, I think this is year 4, Camp Curiosity. We're very excited about it. So we will be at 10 schools plus 10 Judy centers. We will be serving now rising kindergarten students, and it's a half-day program. It's a STEAM-based curriculum. Our teachers love it. Our kiddos love it. Families really enjoy it as well. So students are learning, not just learning all summer long, but they really are having a good time. There's lots of hands-on opportunities for them. And again, when we look at the data of our students who attend our Camp Curiosity program, 50.3% of them are demonstrating readiness on KRA, which again, that's really why we do this, is because we want to see the great outcomes that come from the opportunities that our students have. And that is, I believe, my last slide. So I am happy to take any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I see one hand already. Let's see. Recognizing Commissioner Kenyatta Bay.
First of all, hey, by the way, the job you have done here has been remarkable. I want to compliment you. It's just like fabulous work. The question that I have is over a stretch of time. Being a middle school teacher, I know the results of that early preparation. Okay, and you are doing a good job, a great job actually, of repairing some of the damage that was done by the pandemic, actually. You know, and so you're re-leveling the playing field. Do you think the wound has been healed? How are we doing in that progression, et cetera? Even with the new crop of students that are coming in, we are still dealing with reverb from that. And I just wanted to know whether or not you see the upward slope there, because I look at that. There is a slide there that shows special needs, and my question was, does that plateau? Will that plateau? Because I think it's going to plateau given time, but I see the increase, and that's why that's the general gist of what I'm curious about.
Yep, that's a great question. It's a question we think about every day. So I think that we, in my my uneducated guess with no data behind me, I think that we are hopefully on the downward slope of seeing this uptick in students. When we looked year over year at the increase that we were seeing with our students with disabilities, there were 2 years there where we saw a 20% increase, and then 1 year where we saw almost a 30% increase. Like this is not you know, the little 3 or 4% that you think that you're going
Right.
to see. We were seeing incredibly huge numbers. This year, we've seen about a 9% increase, which, while still a lot, is way less than what we had been experiencing before. If I look at that, I hope that we are kind of starting to be kind of on that downward slope. Also, we have to think about the birth years of our students. So our kiddos who are in pre-K for this school year 24-25, these are kiddos who were born during the pandemic or kind of right before. So we are starting to see the students who were born right after, who were perhaps able to have more socialization, who were able to go to more doctor's appointments, who were able to get more early intervention services. So again, in a kind of like uneducated guess, we're thinking that we are kind of on the downward slope of some of these things. And then just as far as who we are seeing in our new students, I think we're seeing a little bit less attention for some of our kiddos. We've got the rise of lots of different differing things that are pulling our kids' attention away. So really working on kids being able to kind of attend while they're at school, how they are working and interacting with others. When you don't get to, you know, go to your cousin's house when you're 2 and 3 years old, you don't always know how to handle when someone takes your toy or how to play, you know, together. So those are some of the things that we're seeing. So some behavioral things, but again, want to make sure that we are being responsive to that, so that we can again keep as many kiddos in pre-K and being served in their least restrictive environment as possible.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a pretty thorough answer. I loved it.
Thank you.
All right, I see Commissioner Dr. Redding Lallinger.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Crystal, for being here. A couple questions for me. First, I'm curious about the capacity in our system. So do you have numbers on how many, let's start with pre-K, and then I want to ask the same question about the Judy Centers. How many seats do we have in our pre-K? Maybe you can use last year's numbers if you have them. And how many of those seats were filled by the start of the school year? And then how many seats do we have this year, this upcoming year? Obviously, you don't know how many will be filled, but can we just start with that question?
Yeah, so hold on, let me do my calculator before I give you the wrong number. The number of seats that we had going into this school year was 4,300 pre-K seats. I'm going to find our exact 9/30 data because I don't have that off the top of my head. I don't want to tell you the wrong number. But 4,300 was the number that we had for this school year. And we are still in the process of kind of doing our final proposals and decisions around how many seats that we're going to have for next year. I will say that we did not fill all 4,300 of those seats. Again, I just want to make sure I'm giving you the right number. So that's the answer to that question.
Okay, so in the interim, you can take your time to look at the number, but are we talking 90%? Are we talking 60%? Like, give me a ballpark for how many?
I would say maybe 80, 85, somewhere around there.
Okay, great, thanks. When you do get that number, that would be great. I appreciate it. So then, just let me ask a couple questions about the application window, and let me preface it by saying, I see what appear to be improvements from the system last year, and I applaud those. I think having one application window, regardless of what your tier is, has been helpful to parents. At least that's what I've heard. I do appreciate the moving up the timeline a little bit. I still have some questions about the timeline. I don't quite understand all facets of it. So on the slide here, it says earlier notification to parents May 16th. On the flyer, it says all families will begin receiving notice of school offers on May 16th. So what that says to me is some people will find out on May 16th, but other people will find out later than May 16th. And I'm trying to understand, what does that actually mean in practice? Can you help me understand when the majority of parents will find out and when the sort of last possible date that someone might find out that they have a seat is?
Yeah, so the majority of families, I believe, are really going to find out on May 16th. So it's hard to say who and how. It's really going to be based on how many folks that you had enroll that were priority one for which seats in which school. So that's where some of the variability is going to come in. Also, we're trying to have kind of a window in which families need to let us know, like, yes, I'm taking this seat, or no, I'm not taking this seat, because then that's going to determine whether or not, again, based on how many seats are still available at that school, who gets like the next level of notification. So it's really is based on how many kiddos of which priority level are applying for how many seats at which school is how all of that notification will be rolled out. With this, moving this up to May 16th, I believe that all families will at least hear something in the month of May. Now, you might be a family who might not hear, you might maybe hear back on May 16th that you're on a wait list, but maybe then you'll hear the week after that actually you're not on the wait list anymore, but that's going to be based on if someone took the seat or not. So there's, again, just a bit of variability in there. But our intention was really that most families would find out in the month of May during that time. So that's before the school year is up. You have the time to go to the school. You can see the school while, things are kind of still up and running. You have time to get all of your paperwork and stuff together. We also heard from our private providers. Again, there's lots of variability that's happening during this time of people kind of going from this school to that school. So we wanted to ensure that we were letting folks know kind of as early as possible.
Okay, I appreciate that. So what I'm hearing is the aspiration is to let everybody know something in the month of May, even if that something is you're on a wait list.
Yes.
And you may find out later in the summer if you got in or not.
Yes.
I guess this is a statement of personal belief, speaking for myself, and I just want to sort of say it because it may help illuminate why I'm asking these questions. And that is, and I think you've probably heard me articulate this before, which is I'm looking at, for me, a pre-K system here in Baltimore City that serves our kids really well. Our data is some of the best data in the state. I'm hearing from you, we have more capacity in the system than we have seats filled, or at least that was the case last year. I'm hearing anecdotally that there are families who would go to a Baltimore City pre-K school, but they didn't find out in enough time to be able to make the decision that they needed to make for their family. And when I put all those things together, I just see so much potential that we are missing out on. And I see us moving in the right direction. But I think for me, like one of the things that ails our system here in Baltimore City is we don't have a lot of buy-in in our school system as a whole from people who don't take part in it. And I think pre-K is a really incredible opportunity to showcase how amazing our schools are and to get a wonderful cross-section of families from across our city into our schools. And I'm trying to make sure that the policies that we have are doing a good job of actually, like, we could be at capacity. The way I'm looking at the numbers, we could be at capacity. We could fill all of our pre-K seats in our system. I know it's not that simple. I know there are certain pre-Ks that are more desirable than others, so forth and so on. But I do think the clarity of application, the timeline of notifying parents, I think all of those things make a big difference. And I also have an hypothesis that there are families that would consider city schools when their kids are in pre-K and see how wonderful our schools are and keep their kids in our schools. But the ship may sail after pre-K, maybe not, maybe kindergarten's still an option. And so that's why I sort of always press on the timeline and why I'm always sort of curious about capacity and all of these things, because I just think we have a missed opportunity here. I want to be clear, and I've said this before, our first obligation is to provide pre-K for kids who otherwise wouldn't have, productive programming for them to go to. I'm completely bought into that. But when I hear we have extra seats and I see parents who don't want to pay thousands and thousands of dollars to send their kid to some child care center, I just see a missed opportunity. So that's why I'm sort of asking the questions that I'm asking. And what I would like, I know we get sort of after action review in the fall, we get a report back from you all about what did we learn from the process and those kinds of things. And what I would really like to emphasize now while you're collecting the data and you're out talking to people, and what I would like to hear in the fall is what are the reasons that people who applied to our schools in pre-K and ended up not taking a spot, what are the reasons that they decided not to come? How many of those are related to timeline? How many of those are related to people not getting into the programs that they wanted, so forth and so on? That's the data that I think will help our system continue to improve. And I say all that saying, I want to applaud you because I think this is a better system than it was last year, but I think it can continue to get better. So I will stop there. I just thought it was important to name that because you always hear me asking, these sort of same questions about capacity and timeline. And that's fundamentally why. I have two more questions, but I've taken up a lot of airtime, so I want to pass it to my colleague. And if the chair will permit me to ask two shorter questions, I will afterward. Otherwise, I can follow up in writing. Go ahead, Emily.
All right. Thank you, first of all, for having me today as a guest to the space. I had a question, I think, looking at kind of the distribution of those students that are unfilled, because I think it's some of this speaks to like larger themes that follow us throughout our education, and that we have some programs that are very popular and very successful, and those are not distributed equitably throughout our city. So I guess I was wondering, like, whether that is an anecdotal no, or I think just looking to support the board in the future of like looking at where are the distribution of those programs that are at 100% enrollment and are at 100% enrollment in June, as opposed to ones that still have open seats and are filling kids on a rolling basis in October. So I think just looking not just the total number as a district, but what does that look like functionally throughout the district, and what's the outcome of that situation?
If I could just kind of provide some quick, kind of understanding as to how some of those decisions are made too, what goes into that is you have to, when we are thinking about where we're placing pre-K, we have to be thoughtful about, one, what the trajectory is for that whole school. So again, the more pre-K seats that we put there, then that you have to make that many kindergarten seats plus first, plus, kind of going all the way up. So in some of our schools that are, rocking and rolling and super popular, we have to balance what that would look like. Because if we continue to add pre-K seats there, of course, we would love to do that. But then you also have to think about what happens if that kindergarten number gets that big and keeps going. So that's one of the things that you always kind of have to think about, even as we're determining where the seats go. The second thing is, we do really intentional pushes with some of our schools that we find to be low enrolled kind of after this first round. I know our Office of Enrollment Choice and Transfer reached out to a lot of families last year to say like, hey, you didn't take a seat. Can I ask why? And actually, can I support you with being able to enroll somewhere else? And so I think that we, again, have some of our schools that are a bit more popular in where folks want to go, and then others where people aren't quite, they're not quite running to go there. And so that's also, we would love to figure out how we can connect folks who may think I only want to go to school A, but we want to tell them like school B is also like equally as amazing. But sometimes it's a little bit harder to connect those dots with folks saying, okay, I'm willing to go to school B, or I'm happy to go over there. So those are just some of the other things that happen. And we are also really want to push and make sure that our priority one families are who we are, ensuring that we have seats for. And so some of just the trends of enrollment for some of our priority one families tends to happen, yes, in the springtime, but also kind of tends to happen throughout the summer as well. So there's a balance of trying to ensure that there are seats and spaces for everyone in the right places and in the neighborhood where you want and what makes sense. So I appreciate the push that you all, often give, because it helps us to really make sure that we're refining the process. But those are just some of the things that also go into the decision making of who gets what and who goes where, even in how we're determining where the seats go. And then again, it's going to look different as soon as it kind of gets opened up to families and how families are receiving that and where they want to go.
Right. Is that, I know Dr. Lallinger, you had a couple of more questions. I have a couple of more. We're a little bit beyond the time here. I'm going to ask or just acknowledge one, the other part of this is, yep, as my colleagues have referenced, you got to get kids in seats. And we know that our young people who matriculate from Judy centers or more KRA ready, then they get into our early learning programs and are succeeding and are fully matriculating. And so filling those seats is very important, as my colleagues have referenced. I think there are other factors that are impacting that as well as the blueprint. And I would listen, the fact that you got up to 9%. I was on the early end of those discussions. And we didn't see how we were going to do it. And so it was certainly progress. But I want to talk about the other half of this, which is teacher preparation and the paraprofessional pathway. One, I was really excited to hear about the fidelity checks. We're investing a lot of money in this curriculum, or I forget what we're calling it, educational
High
resource.
quality instructional material.
That part. So it is only as good as we're able to use it. And so I love to hear about the fidelity checks, and we can do this in a future meeting. I want to hear about what's happening with that implementation, and if we're able to implement it with fidelity, what the recognition there is, if there are any gaps, because we know the greatest indicator of success is making sure we have highly qualified teachers. With that said, tell me a little bit more, and we won't exhaust it because I know we have to move on, about the paraeducator pathway, because that's going to be critically important in making sure we have a workforce moving forward.
Yep. So one of the requirements in the blueprint is that all of the paraeducators within pre-K are high quality and kind of have this high quality credentialing. So when we started on this pathway, our paraeducators were required to have a high school diploma and to pass the parapro. What the blueprint was looking for was a bit higher credentials with either that AA, the associate's degree, or the child development associate certificate. That is more commonly used in childcare, so that was even new for us in public education. So we really wanted to work with our paraeducators to support them in finding a pathway to be able to stay within our pre-K classrooms. We appreciate that the blueprint was really pushing us. We have 2 instructional persons within our classrooms. We are required to do that. No other grade has that. So we want to make sure that we are utilizing our teachers and our paraeducators really, really well. And so making sure that our paraeducators have all of this wonderful knowledge and education is really important to us. So we wanted to really figure out how we could support our pairs. Many of our pairs have been working in our programs longer than I have been alive. And so we wanted to respect that and to honor that and figure out how we could support them in really being able to create this pathway. So we are working with the Community College of Baltimore County, and they have been great in really being able to take folks wherever they are. So we've got some folks who have their high school diploma, and some folks who have, maybe a whole lot of credits in lots of different things that they just kind of weren't able to piece together to kind of make into an associate's degree. And so they have really taken the time to sit with people, really sit down and figure out what is the best course of action for you in order to help that individual person meet that requirement, whether it be an AA or whether it be a CDA. So they have worked really hand in hand with folks on an individual basis and are creating like these individual kind of course pathways for people. So they've been wonderful partners to work with. This took us it took us a little while to establish the partnership, but once we were able to get it rocking and rolling, then our pairs have been able to take advantage of that. And in the meantime, the state said that they would grandfather in anyone who had 5 years of experience in a pre-K classroom. So our folks who had been doing this for a really long time, who we know have been doing this work, we're able to kind of submit their name, and they will kind of get that same credit as though they were able to have that level of support already.
Excellent. All righty. I look forward always to our early learning updates. Forgive me, Commissioner Dr. Redding Lallinger. I'm going to move us along out of respect for time. But we will look forward to, and we'll let Dr. Judkins or Jonathan know if we have any follow-up questions or actions.
Yeah,
Thank you so
definitely.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All righty. We're a little bit behind time, but I think we can make it up. But this next one is a very, very important topic. I'm looking forward to hearing about the review of proposed changes to the operator renewal process, which we just went through and are going through about to go through again. So, Angela, I see you popped up on the screen. Welcome to Teaching and Learning, and we're all waited with bated breath to hear what you have to say today.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Board Commissioners. I'm also joined by a couple colleagues who are important in this work, and so I want to give them a chance to introduce themselves. First, Tiffany.
Hello, everyone. Tiffany Young, Specialist in Office of New Initiatives.
Chris.
Hello, I'm Chris Wan. I'm the Director of Research in Office of Achievement and Accountability.
Brittany.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brittany Thompson. I'm a program evaluator on Chris's team.
Aaron. Aaron. Well, I want to acknowledge Aaron Searson and Liepa Boberine, as well as Chief Jones, who are our partners in this work. All right. We didn't do it last year because we had so many schools. We had to start orientations in January, but we have built in to the renewal process the ability to kind of hear feedback and think about like proposed changes to the process on an annual basis. And this session with you guys is we want to hear from you too about the options that we're proposing. So I'm hoping for interactive along the way conversation with the board. This is aligned to board priority 6, which is about ensuring that we have high quality educational experiences, including in our charter schools for all of our students. With operator renewal, we met with operators to share proposed changes and gave them 4 weeks to send back feedback. We also met with our charter and operator led advisory board to get feedback. And today we're here with you, with the board, to get feedback with the goal of finalizing any changes that we may make and presenting the final process at the April 22nd board meeting. Just remember, the public operator renewal process happens every 3, 5, or 8 years for schools, depending on their contract terms. Our process is unique. I think people are starting to adapt this process, but we, since the inception of this process in 2011, have had a quantitative and qualitative process that is looking at a variety of factors to really best understand schools, which are complex places. There are 3 key kind of categories within our process that we look at: student achievement, which has the most weight, school climate, and then financial management and governance. As I said, we built in a debriefing process so we can learn and improve the process. For a good chunk of time, many of the changes have come out of just adapting to a new assessment, but there's been other changes along the way because we've gone through a lot of change based on state changes to things. And so we've just concluded renewal with 18 schools, who will be entering new contracts at the beginning of June. And we have 7 schools that are scheduled to go up to for renewal this fall. This just kind of goes over the timeline. As you can see, we kind of spend the year in renewal on different cycles with schools. These are the 7 schools that are going to be up for renewal in the fall with the board. One of the things we wanted to make sure that we added, so this is just clarity about the difference between, particularly between highly effective and effective. Many schools are doing great work, and everybody wants to be considered highly effective. In terms of what it means in terms of like the terms or overall understanding of school quality, is that it's not much difference between being effective and highly effective. There's no difference in terms of like whether you'd be recommended for like 5 or 8 years if you're highly effective or effective. Effective means a strong, good practice, consistent practice. Highly effective is we're saying, hey, there's something that's exemplary or model that's happening there. And so we thought this could be good to add as a clarity of the process, because we always have schools who are like, but I want it to be highly effective. So just not a new thing, but just a point of clarity around what the ratings mean. These are the measures, and so all of these measures for academic success that you see here on the left are the measures that are, within schools' contract. The measures themselves have not changed very much since 2011. We are proposing to look at trend differently this year with this performance over time, so that's why it's pink. So there is a proposal here to look at this differently, but none of the measures themselves, other than that, have really changed much over the years. The way we are thinking about or proposing to look and replace trend is connected to how we look at absolute performance. And so that's why this slide is here. Absolute performance was just a school's most recent year. We start by looking at this school's average performance level. And so the rating starts there. So schools whose average student, for example, is A1 or is considered a beginning learner that needs lots of remediation to be ready for the next grade level, that's considered not effective. A school where their typical learner is developing learner, meaning there's partial proficiency, but still some work to get caught up to the next grade level, is considered developing, and so forth. So that's sort of the first part. The next thing we look at is the percent proficient, and in comparison to schools with similar poverty. And if a school's performance is 5 percentage points or more higher than the median of schools with similar poverty, we bump them up. So that school where the average performance level was developing, if they're, let's say, their percent proficient for their school is 40%, and the median for their poverty group is 35%, they would get the bump up to be considered effective. Again, controlling for poverty, because we know there's a relationship between absolute performance and poverty. And so that is how we look at it. We're not proposing to do anything different, but we're sharing that because we haven't been able to do trend because we have been in a new assessment. And so historically, trend has been one of the measures within the renewal process. And trend looks at the difference, basically subtracting the most recent year's performance from the earliest year that we look at, and then comparing that to schools based on percentiles is how we looked at trend in the past. We're proposing actually scoring each of those prior years similarly to how we do with the absolute performance, but weighting the most recent performance differently potentially than those 2 older years, but using the same methodology instead of trend. And so let me pause here because that's a lot, and I just want to see if there's questions about what we're proposing, or if Chris maybe wants to clarify anything if I wasn't clear.
I think we're still processing, but I see Commissioner Kenyatta Bay has a question.
No, you have been pretty crystal thus far. I must offer my apologies. I have another meeting that I have to transition to. So thank you very much. I see what you have going over. I'm going over all your information, and I will have questions that I will submit later.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. For...
No problem.
All right.
Commissioner
Yeah.
Loninger.
Sorry, I just wanted, I'm glad my fellow commissioner understood it because I'm still processing it. So is it, can I just repeat it back to make sure I understand what you're saying? Are you saying that previously when this data was available before assessments changed, you basically just looked at the difference in the most recent data available to as compared to the first year in the renewal window? And now what you are proposing to do is to look at the difference between 22 school year to 23 to the most to 25, and somehow come up with a methodology that incorporates all of those? Is that the average of those? That's the piece that I guess I'm not quite understanding.
Yep, and then I'm going to invite Chris too, who maybe explain it better to me, but I'm going to start. We're proposing to rate. So right now we give a rating, like, or your let's say your 26 results or your 25 results are the most recent. And so we give a rating, right? And using this methodology, we're proposing to use the same methodology to give a rating for your 23 results and your 24 results. Using the same methodology. That's the first part of what we're proposing.
Yeah, so
So-
instead of kind of just looking at the change from the first year to the last year on ranking that against other schools in the district, we're, to your point, we're kind of looking at each of those years and how they did in them individually rather than just sort of the difference between the two.
How would that roll up into an like I understand in the previous one, you're comparing the difference to other schools in the district, but when you have multiple measures like this, how does that roll up into one indicator?
Yeah,
So
so
we-
it actually comes out as sort of multiple indicators for each year, and we sort of divide the weight or how they contribute to the total between each of those. And Angela, that might kind of
That's
be
the next
something you're
slide,
getting into
yeah.
on the next slide a little bit, but yeah, it's we look at each year, and Angela will show you guys like we're dividing the weights up a little bit. So more emphasis will be placed generally on the most recent year, but we're also going to capture some of that from like the couple years before the most recent year as well.
Or that's what we're proposing. And so we're proposing kind of 3 different ways we could weight it. So, this is that absolute year, this is that performance over time. So remember, this has 2 years in it. So option A would weight the most recent year twice as much as each of the prior years, right? Because this would be 7.5 for each year, right? So that's option A, for example. Option B would have them more similarly weighted, where the most recent years were of 10 and the 2 prior years are worth 7.5. And then option C would weight each year the same, 10, 10, and 10. And so we're asking you guys your opinions about that.
Now or at the end of your presentation? Are you
No,
asking
now,
now?
well, now,
Right now.
or if you want to, I mean, you guys also have the presentation, but if you have thoughts now, we'll take them, or if you want us to wait, we can. Okay. You want us
Yeah.
to keep going?
Yeah.
Okay. And so we've also, the same way we're going with you, we've shared this with the advisory board and with operators. From the advisory board, we heard a preference for option B because they feel like it balances the weights while still giving sufficient consideration over time. It provides visibility into the past performance. Like that's the thing they've been missing seeing, right? Because we haven't had that in the most recent year. From operators, we heard a strong preference for the prior methodology under trend. because they felt like it gives credit for improvement, and they're not sure that the same methodology would have if the new methodology would have the same effect. We heard concerns about weighting them the same, option C, because they felt like that just averaging them could diminish a school's gains, like giving credit for gains or for improvements, and that it might not be enough to like have an area of like effectiveness, right? If it's like if there's an improvement, if it's muted, like if your prior performance was lower, it could bring down the average basically. We also heard that C might favor higher performing schools who might not be like changing as much, and that it might not, consider the improvement overall relative for schools that are really, struggling to improve. And the average might not give credit for some of that incremental progress. We also heard feedback that like a proposal of like, could we delay for a year and so schools could see what it looks like once we had 3 years of data to test the pros and cons of each method. Like if there was felt a need that we had to have this, that there was a preference for option A, which gave the most weight to almost double the weight for the most recent performance. Next is student growth. So this again is growth is so performance this time we're looking like overall changes in overall school performance. Growth is looking at individual students and how a school is moving individual students who start at the same performance level over time, then compare it to other students. Are you growing at the similar rate as other students? Right now, how we rate it is based on just a percentile ranking. So again, and we'll look at the ranking in a second. What we're proposing is to using a methodology similar, and I think we're still kind of trying to work through it and getting feedback, but more similar to how the state considers growth. And so it takes it out of a comparison. So it would give schools an absolute goal. Like that's something we've heard over and over again, that with the ranking, it's hard to know how I'm going to perform in Renault compared to other schools. And so like an absolute goal makes it really clear, like that's this is it, it's like there's a clearer place to sort of aim for. And we use the state's growth percentile, right, to come up with the ratings now. And so the comparison would be using sort of those standards from the state. And while it's still it would maintain accountability for schools. And so this shows you how we currently, so the top is showing how we currently rank schools. So schools, again, we use this SGP from the state, and then they're ranked against other schools in the district. And so if you're like in these percentiles, that's how your rating is sort of determined. So if you're at the 65th or to the 79th, basically, you're effective. If you're above the 80th percentile, you're highly effective. We're proposing to the state uses this kind of high growth. It's similar, but not the same, because they have like a 5 scale system. So we're trying to take that and convert it to a 4 scale system. So that's why you see the typical in the middle, split between the middle. But this is the way like the state describes growth, of like what's considered high growth, what's considered typical, what's considered low growth. So we're proposing to use this sort of same methodology. We're still sort of thinking through like what the appropriate cut points are, because we're trying to go from a thing that has 5 scales to 4. And Chris, I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
No, I think that's basically it. I just think that kind of moving to these set cutoffs rather than rank, which is relative to other schools in the district, is just a little more straightforward. And we received some feedback from folks that was the case as well. It's a little easier to understand how the score is generated without having that rank process. So, yeah.
So that's what we're proposing. And I don't know if you guys have any immediate thoughts to that.
I'm generally favorable to having schools have a target to reach rather than a variable like a comparison like that. So I'm generally favorable to that, but I keep wondering also like, I don't know, checking for my own understanding and make sure like trying to think of an example. Wondering if I would grasp it better if I had an example. I don't know. I'm just processing out loud. I'm listening and following along. Doc, you got anything to say? You're good. You're just processing as well.
No, I mean, this one seems pretty clear and pretty
Yeah.
straightforward to me. The previous one, the
Yeah.
previous one does not. And so I want to just, come back to that one. But this seems pretty straightforward.
Cool. All right.
So feedback we've heard from the advisory board is again that they support the change. They also see like there's more of a distribution of performance more evenly in terms of the evaluation. They think it still maintains the appropriate level of accountability. Some operators express concern about ratings being based solely on a state comparison, so concern about like rather than a district comparison. And then others we heard they agreed with like aligning the methodology of the state and making it more predictable, more easier to understand and like a set target. So like we've heard some mixed feelings about this particular proposal.
But Angela, I guess I'm a little confused by the operator concern about the state comparison because SGP looks at the expected growth for a student in a given with a given previous performance, right? So it's not. I mean, well, okay. I guess I will.
It's growth is something as a district. It's one of those things where we have done well in that measure, like in comparison to others in the state. But I think we have done historically like a district comparison because in absolute, like in the past when that was the percentile ranking, our performance may not be as high as other places in the state. And so I think it's that worry that's triggering that concern because that 50 is within the state, right? Like
that
those are
makes
state
sense.
cutoffs.
Yeah. I guess that concern makes sense when you're looking at absolute scores, but when you're looking at growth, I don't quite understand it as much.
Yeah. I mean, everybody's performance is different. So people are thinking about that relative to their own performance as well. So people may feel like they do better when it's a comparison within us as a district.
Okay.
We're also proposing changes to our effective programming across racial ethnic groups. And so, we're maintaining it as a qualitative measure. Last year, we only looked at in terms of the assessment data, we looked at SGP data. And that we learned and that gave us an incomplete understanding because we had some schools that had conditions around this measure. We ended up having more information like their absolute data for some schools. And that gave us greater context that we feel like is necessary to really understand how a school is performing in this and to be clear about it. So because the school can have a high growth but low absolute results or vice versa, could have a low SGP, a high absolute performance. And so it allows the reviewers and everyone that's looking at the data to have a better understanding of what's happening within schools. And an example I use is like one of our schools, if we just looked at SGP for their school, the SGP of their white students was lower than white students in the district and significantly lower than Black students in their school. And so we just wrote about that as well as their practices. A takeaway their families could have is that, wow, if I'm a white parent, my students are not doing as well in this school and I'm concerned about it. But if you looked at their absolute data, the opposite was true, where their white students were performing significantly better than their Black students and on par with white students within the district. There wasn't a significant difference. So you just, like, if you just have that one thing, you miss the full context about what is actually happening in the school. So we're just proposing to add the look at all of those cuts as part of how we understand how a school is doing in that measure. So it's proposed additions, and in the appendix, it goes through each of the categories. So we just use highly effective as an example, but the pink is the proposed additions, so that it includes us. We're still, again, all of these are a draft. We're still trying to get feedback from people, but basically wanting to add looking at average performance level and proficiency level, again, compared to the within these groups with a poverty comparison. And so those are the changes that we're proposing to this measure. I just want to pause to see if you guys have any kind of immediate thoughts about that.
I do not. I think that's.
I'd like to read the language, but I think what I'm hearing you say is let's look at absolute measures and growth to come up with a composite score, and that makes good sense to me.
From the advisory board, we heard they were very supportive of the change. I think it adds the added perspective, especially in trying to understand what's happening across groups in an equitable way. From some operators, we also heard a support of the change for the current cycle, and felt that the language provided greater clarity to what was actually being measured. But we also heard folks wanting consideration for timing. That was a thing we heard a lot. So in timing in general, and then also consideration for just when the measure is being triggered, if a student population is changing within a school and they have a new students with new students who they're starting to learn that community as a changing district. The next thing that where we proposed change was around graduation rate. Our current methodology, as you can see, is here, is based on these absolute cutoffs. And so if you are, if you're below that cutoff for a 3 year, you can be non-effective, right? If you're below 71%, for example, you would be considered not effective. The proposed change that we are proposing to add is to give some consideration for growth. And then we've seen this come up in a couple cycles of renewal, where there are schools where if you just average to 3 years, they would end up in not effective because of 1 year or maybe an earlier year where there was real low performance. But we saw increases over time. There were schools that just went through renewal recently where that was the case, where if we actually looked at that 3 year period, we saw a significant improvement of that school, but they were considered not effective because we didn't have the ability to give any credit for improvement. And so what we're proposing to add into the middle is if a school is below 71%, but their most recent year is 71%, to give them improvement in similar language for that 75%. So we're still holding to we have a big goal as a district to get our grad rates up overall high. And so we're trying to maintain that, but also give credit. We're seeing improvement in that last year when we're looking at that 3 year period. And so that's what we're proposing as a change. So that's one way. Another way we thought about it is we could just weight the averages and have the weighted average then be where the cutoffs are. And again, putting the most weight on the most recent and breaking down. So those are kind of the two options that we've put out there for feedback. And I don't know if you guys have any immediate thoughts about either.
Generally makes sense. Would love to consider the time to consider the difference between A and B.
And from the advisory board, we heard a strong preference for option A. But they suggested spreading the credit for weight across the measures. Was feedback that we heard from the advisory board. When we had to turn in the presentation, we hadn't gotten feedback yet from operators with high school grades, but we saw a preference for the weighted average in that feedback. So that's what we've heard so far. And then these are the climate measures. Again, these are the measures that are, in the measures for the renewal process. We are suggesting a change that's related to the school effectiveness review. At the time when we were updating our contract with SchoolWorks, the district was also reorganizing how we did special ed. So we weren't actually sure we would have the team that does our compliance visits. So for effective programming for students with disabilities, we're looking at the evidence schools provide in their renewal application. We're looking at their performance for students with disabilities, other quantitative data like the attendance rates and how that compares to their gen ed, suspensions, chronic absence rates. We're also looking at if they've had any kind of issues with like being compliant, missed services, any complaints that have been substantiated. And there's a site visit that our in-house team conducts with MSDE. And so one of the things we thought about adding was to get a better understanding of just what's happening in terms of instructional practice, having SchoolWorks who's looking at instruction anyway, also look at what that means for students with disabilities. And one of the things that we've has been a challenge for schools and providing, I think, evidence and sort of articulating their story is a lot of times what they end up writing is a lot of paragraphs about how they're following the law in different ways, but not really highlighting like what are the interventions you're doing, what are the specific things that you're doing. So we thought this is another way to be able to help them more articulate their story with additional way to provide evidence through that process and an additional look. Originally, we were thinking about including that in the school effectiveness reviews that actually are starting soon. We were really strong. That's a big change. Don't do it. And so we've amended our recommendation to be to pilot it for this year so we can all see because this site visit is intense for schools. There's a lot of preparation that goes into it. And it is a new thing that we're talking about. What we would be looking at is a new key action that's looking at, again, how do general educators and special educators collaborate to collect and review and identify students with disabilities and provide supports and services, and then how the school itself monitors progress for students with disabilities and uses those results to inform how they support students and align with specific targeted kind of goals for students. And so we were proposing adding this component. So right now, what we look at is the evidence from our compliance report, from our compliance visit that our Office of Special staff from that support special education in schools complete, and then evidence that's collected as part of the process already in terms of from the application and the data things I talked about. And then we would add this. And so what we talked about with SchoolWorks, given there was like a real clear feedback on this one, that we were like, this upcoming process is too soon, that we would pilot it, and we've asked them to not include it in the report that is part of this process, but to share it with us and with schools after the process concluded, so we can all look at it together to see like, does it helpful? Does it give us and get feedback once schools have that and we've gone through that and after renewal, so it's not coloring how anybody is reviewing or understanding the process. So this shares that we got some initial feedback. Advisory board is supportive of adding this, or it believes it makes sense. It believes better understanding of what's happening with schools with students with disabilities. Remember, advisory board helps us review the applications. From operators, we heard like very vociferously, it was a big change, don't do it this year. And that we heard from many people, they would support it for the following year. And so we agree with that. And so that's a place where just because of the timing of when the site visits begin, we have said, okay, we're just going to pilot it for this year. And then we heard just other general feedback, so I wanted to share that. One of those was like consider ways to assess and give credit for English language development. So we have a number of schools that have a high multilingual student population. And so wanting us to think about if there are other ways that we can kind of understand that, give credit to schools that are doing a good job with that population. Currently, where the schools are able to kind of tell that story in Fidelity and Charter, and how we can control for our poverty groups, sort of like consider that, but we don't have a clear way. And obviously, effective program across racial ethnic groups gets at that, but that's not perfect either because it's not getting at multilingual learners. So I think this is something we want to kind of discuss more with schools to get more feedback. But we heard a desire for that. We also heard a request, and this has been like a consistent request for sharing data tables or underlying data tables with operators between renewal cycles. And so this is something that we've talked with OAA about. There's some challenges, but this is the thing that we're trying to think about if there are ways we can do things like that. We've also heard a request for just getting their poverty groupings annually, just so when they're tracking their own data, they can see what, because it can fluctuate a little bit just based on population. We also heard requests for considering mean scale scores for MCAT results for small schools to help, they said would help them better understand how the composition of students each year impacts school performance, because if you're small numbers of kids can fluctuate where you land. So just helping them track where they need to be for improvement is how we're understanding that request. We heard requests particularly around like a lot of the qualitative measures, including the effective programming for students with disability, having more explanation in the report itself about what things contributed to, right, and at developing overall. Was it because of my tests? Was it because of my practices? Like explaining more granularly how those things contribute to their overall rating for a school for that measure. And then we've heard really strongly this request about not making changes in the middle of contract. That's hard because everybody's always in the middle of a contract in terms of schools, but we've heard that as a strong request. But every year there's somebody up for renewal. But that's the sort of the summary of what we've heard so far, and that's everything.
I yield to my fellow commissioner to start off with.
Thanks. Thank you for the presentation, Angela. This is helpful, and I think, part of my takeaway here is that, some of these proposed changes. Well, first of all, I guess let me applaud the commitment to continuously wanting to improve this process. I think that's important. I appreciate that about this office. You're sort of always thinking about how can we make this better. I think some of the changes you presented, just by virtue of the fact that it's even taking us some time to really digest what the implications of these would be, and given the timeline, feel like they could benefit from a little bit more consideration, not because I don't think that they're well thought out, but just because it's going to take everybody a second to understand the implications here. And so I guess my first question is, and actually, would you mind, for the question, going back to the timeline, the renewal process timeline slide, which I believe is slide 6. It seems to me, when I'm looking at this timeline, that proposing changes right after, like right now in April, which makes sense, it's fresh in your mind from the last cycle, but proposing changes to implement for the next cycle seems like it is a burden on you and your office, which again, I applaud the commitment to improvement, but like it seems like your team is going to have to adapt to a new set of metrics. It seems like the charter schools that are up for renewal in that next cycle, and we saw this reflected in the letter that was submitted to this committee. It's a lot to wrap your mind around for a process that for them clearly is there's a lot of pressure and expectation on that, and they're doing a lot of preparation for it. And three, just for the board, if the process is sort of always changing and we're getting all, this huge mountain of data every year on schools, that it's a lot for us to process. And it seems to me like we could, and it's just sort of a question, but we could have a cycle that says the learnings we take from this year are piloted in the following year and then are implemented after we've gotten a chance to look at what this data would look like and what the implications are in the next year. Sort of like what you were explaining, it sounds like where you've landed on the addition of the special education component to the school effectiveness review. I really liked hearing that. You heard the feedback and you sort of decided, I couldn't tell if that was feedback from Schoolworks as well, that it's a lot to implement immediately, that it's going to be a pilot. You can sort of look at the data, you can talk to the operators about how reflective the data was and how it went. You can think about it, we can think about it. So I guess part of my question, I guess my ultimate question is, do you feel sort of a pressure to implement these, turn this around for the next year? And if so, why? Like, what is the need to sort of make all of these changes immediately following a renewal cycle for the next renewal cycle?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's part of what we're trying to understand from schools. So like that's, these are the things we've heard requests from MAPS. Like I have a regular meeting with them to talk about renewal and proposed changes, and they wanted us to do that earlier, like in when we were still in the other renewal process. And so, but in terms of when they have to take effect, I think that's part of, and we talked about that with operators, like, and I think that could be where we land, that we don't do any of them for this upcoming year. So we stay with the process we just used. We didn't make any changes last year for the schools to be able to do that. I think that's what we're sharing transparently, because people wanted to know what we were thinking. This is what we're thinking, this is what we learned, and this is what we're thinking. I think we're open to the timeline. I wanted to make sure we heard from everybody, and we had to turn this in before we got like that letter. We got that letter too, in terms of like the feedback and the feeling of schools. Many of you just went through the renewal process, and but we remain, like, that's why we have a process to meet with schools. We don't just make changes unilaterally. I don't believe in that as a product. Like, we've never done that. And so if people feel like this is too much change, we don't have to do any of them for this upcoming year. We could absolutely wait.
Well, and I just want to make sure I wasn't missing something. Like, I'm open to, if there's an impetus, like, we feel like this just went so poorly that
literally,
we need to do. Yeah.
Commissioner Wallinger, this is literally what we said to schools when we shared it with them on March 11th. Your feedback could be, don't do any of these this year. This makes sense for 27. And we heard that, from schools, your feedback. Like, so again, there isn't any rush to do any of these changes.
Okay, that's helpful. So then I guess just as a general statement of feedback, as I'm looking at, part of this, Dr. Alvarez, too, is like, I see how hard your team works to just prepare. I know this was an unusual year, but just to prepare the volume of data that is needed to go through one renewal cycle. And then
that's OAA. I just want to acknowledge the team that has to do all of that data is Chris's team.
Yes.
And I like they're the people that are doing all the data, all the analysis, and helping us think through even what to propose in the first place.
So, credit wherever credit is it should be due. I know your team works hard to compile it as well. I guess I'm just saying I would prefer two things. I really appreciate the sort of thoughtful nature of how can we always make this better. I especially appreciate going to operators and saying, this is what we're thinking. We want to get your feedback on it. And then finally, I really like being able to see if there's no reason why we need to make a change immediately for the following year. I like being able to see sample data. Like, you thought about this far enough in advance that we could collect sample data for each of these proposed changes, and we could take a look at it over the course of the year, but not make it part of the official process. And then you may come to some other conclusion after we've gone through it, because even Commissioner Slater-Harrington said, I think some examples would be helpful. I think a whole year of examples could be particularly helpful for us to see what we're getting out of one way of cutting the data versus another. So I guess my overall feedback is, keep innovating, keep thinking about how to make this better, keep talking to operators about what their experience with this is, and yeah, give us a year to pilot things. Because I look at this timeline and it just, everything happens bam, bam, bam. I mean, the reviews are happening in this month and next month. Applications are due in September, and you're compiling data over the summer. So my vote would be pilot where possible and introduce formal changes for the following year. That's
Yeah.
just my humble one commissioner's perspective. Slater Harrington.
Well, since you added my request in there, it's two commissioners of humble opinions. And I think about those parents. Do you remember, Angela, how many parents we heard from? And I think about how how all of this information translates to them, because it, right now in this presentation, it doesn't. But when they're being impacted by it, when schools, communities are being impacted by it, I think it's important that they understand. And so if I'm struggling to kind of conceptualize what I'm hearing, I want to make sure that the public can, and understand the proposed changes, which I think I am, for the most part, favorable of. But having actual examples of data to be able to say, this is the potential impact. If this is how your school showed up, here are the numbers, this is how they would be rated and the ultimate result of it. And so that's why I'm asking for, I need tangible kind of things. And I think that for the general public who don't speak education jargon or regularly operate with these kind of factors, may benefit from that as well. So it's just a note.
Can I have one last thing, Commissioner Slater Harrington?
Of course.
Angela, I actually thought there were some pretty thoughtful pieces of feedback from operators on slide 31. And I sort of heard you talk through them. I don't think I was super clear, and maybe it's because you need more time to see the feasibility. I don't think I was super clear on what you were saying you would implement or not, and maybe you need time to talk and to think about it. But things like getting data tables between renewal cycles seems like it could be a lot of work for the data office, but also could be super helpful to charter. So I'm just curious about the feasibility there. Providing the poverty index groupings annually seems like probably not as much work. It seems like something that could be pretty easy to do and could be helpful as well. So do you have a position on, we got this feedback and we are going to implement it, or this is not feasible, or is there a time at which we could get a response for these things? Because a lot of these seem like they make good sense.
Yeah, we'll have a response when we do the final presentation for the upcoming process. I think we're still talking about it with OAA because, to your point, there's some things that have a lift that we might not have enough manpower to do, just because of what's entailed in there, and can have unintended consequences. So we want to make sure that we've thought through all of those things, and they're not all, some of these things may be more doable. So I think we're kind of in that place of still talking about it, but we will have clear answers on that soon.
Got it. Well, I appreciate that. And I agree with you. I mean, not making changes except for the start of a contract term would probably mean that you have, different rules that different schools are operating by in almost any cycle. That seems tough. But I think what I'm hearing and the underlying sentiment there is like more lead time would be helpful. And so I think if we can operate with that spirit, I think that would be much appreciated. And I think it would just help everybody in the process, just, be able to wrap their mind around changes. So thank you for the presentation. And I look forward to hearing where we land on this.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, guys.
Angela, and thank you, Chris, my old friend. It's on. All righty. All right, let's move us along to our next agenda item, which is procurement. Where are my friends from procurement? Where are you
Hi,
from?
good afternoon.
There you are.
We're here. We're here. My name's Katie or Catherine Kamenecki, and I am a contracts administrator here at City Schools. And we have one academic item, but there was no April ops agenda, so there are a number of operating items that are coming before the board today, so that we can make sure to keep those projects moving forward, so they're not held up till the end of May.
Got it.
Yep. But the first item we have is section 1201, and the Chief Academic Officer requests the board's approval of a 3-year contract with the Maryland School of the Blind. And this is for orientation, mobility, extended school year services, and Braille services for the visually impaired and blind students. The estimated total amount of this contract is $700,000, and the contract term is July 1, 2024 through June 30th, 2027.
I thought that
This does go back to the
looked
beginning of
forward.
this fiscal
Commissioner,
year.
I think you're breaking up. I
Commissioner,
think
do you
you
have
asked,
any questions with regard to this?
not on this one. Can I ask, I'm a little bit confused though, and I didn't prepare with the operations items. Am I hearing you correctly, Catherine, that because the operations committee is not meeting, the teaching and learning committee is reviewing the operation? Okay, I didn't. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll just put out there, I don't have questions at this time because I have not had time to review those. And so we can go through each of them. Commissioner Slater-Harrington, I won't have any questions at this time. I didn't review the operations item.
Understandable. This particular one is, it does apply to us, the expansion. The services for visually impaired students. And it was pretty straightforward. Contract goes through 2027 and started July 1 of this fiscal. So no questions for me.
Do you want me to go through the operations items?
We should.
Okay. Okay, here we go. Section 15.1, the Chief Operating Officer requests the board's approval to increase the total contract amount with Plano Coden from $21,066,080 to $25,066,080, and that's an overall increase of $4 million. And this is for the renovation and addition to Mary G. Faring Annex.
Yeah, I just looking at that and it said, I know that they're overflowing. I've been to that school and they're utilizing a church, an adjacent church. And there was unforeseen, they've been in that church for a while. So I'm wondering what was unforeseen here that will warrant it $4 million more.
Good afternoon. I'm Cindy Smith. I'm the Executive Director for Facilities Planning, Design, and Construction. Hi. So we've been working on this project for about 18 months. And we're getting down, and the contractor kind of put the church off towards the end, unfortunately. When they went to start really working in the church, we were originally going to just replace the slate tile on the roof and not the actual structure of the roof. It was wood, and the whole roofing structure is wood. And when we started removing things, we found that wood structure was in a lot worse condition than it was because it was all hidden originally. So we are having to replace a significant amount of the roof structure. We're actually going to be putting steel up there instead even.
Okay. And so what's the long term? This is quite an investment. And this is an annex. So kind of long-term plan for
So the long-term plan for this is this becomes a second building for Marie G. Faring, and it
Okay.
houses the pre-K to 2-year-olds. So
Okay.
it essentially is a stand. It will have that church area becomes basically a multi-purpose room. So it's a kitchen,
Okay.
like it becomes really a standalone building for the pre-K to 2-year-olds or the pre-K to second graders. Let's get that
Yes.
right. Pre-K to second grade.
I knew what you meant. I heard it. I was like, yeah. Okay. All righty. I think that's all the questions I have on that one. Former teacher, I'm going to put on my operations hat and try to, ask deeply intellectual questions about these operations items.
Oh, good. Okay.
All righty. Katie.
Okay, yep, the next one is section 1502. The chief operating officer requests the board's approval of a competitively solicited contract with Nichols Contracting in the amount of $651,240. And this is for elevator replacement services at Lakeland Pre-K to 8 school.
I'm generally favorable of safe elevators, so I'm just going to go ahead and pass on that one. I don't have any questions.
Section 15.3, the chief operating officer requests the board's approval of a competitively bid solicited contract with Chilmar Corporation in the total amount of $547,988. And this is for elevator replacement services at Abbotston Building number 15.
Yeah, same sentiment. Can I ask, Cindy, do we do like a phased thing for elevators? I imagine there's a plan there.
We try to do them over summers, but they typically, between the ordering of the elevator cab and all the motors and everything, it typically, they unfortunately can't be done in those 10 weeks typically. So we will make arrangements with the schools for when's the best timing for taking it down. We'll often get all of the equipment in and then just take it down to try and minimize how much time it is down. I will say several of them are already non-operational to begin with. So, just it's already down and not operating. So us, getting in there and working on it is actually a good thing.
I'm saying from an overall for facilities perspective, so building by building, you're doing.
So we have a massive elevator plan.
Okay.
Yes. So we have a lot of buildings where the elevators have not been operating. A lot of elevators that were well past the life cycle of them. So we have been working our way slowly through all of those old and outdated ones, whether through CIP or in supplemental appropriations. We just approved, another 5 through a supplemental appropriation a few months ago. So, but we've been slowly working our way through trying to upgrade all of those old and outdated elevators.
Okay, and how does that impact our compliance with like making sure we have facility accessibility?
So ADA is a tricky little code because it actually says reasonable accommodations, and reasonable accommodations can mean a variety of things.
Okay.
Reasonable accommodations can mean an elevator, but it can also mean if an elevator is down, actually having to accommodate classes on a lower floor. If we do have a situation where an elevator can't be repaired, or in this case, we actually have 26 or 28 buildings in the district where we don't even have elevators at all, but are 2-story buildings. And so we've been doing reasonable accommodations for many years while we work on actually trying to get elevators installed in those buildings. There technically isn't anything about ADA that says their building has to have an elevator, but we have to do other accommodations when we don't have an elevator, which is not the greatest thing either.
Okay. I think my next question is for Katie. This looks like, is it 2 million? No, 3 million? What's the total that's going to Chilmar between all of these?
I don't have that off the top of my head.
Okay. I mean, it's a lot when you
Rough
think
numbers, 2.5.
each of them looks like it is a $500,000.
Yeah. Yep. I have one,
And
two. Yeah.
So I have line of sight when they bid across this this major elevator plan. So they bid for a certain amount of schools that we plan to get done this year. Each
elevator solicitation each solicitation period is posted independently. Each of them have to meet certain requirements in the solicitation. And in this case, well, in the case of all of our projects, a contractor has to be pre-qualified in the city for certain dollar values. So if this was exceeding, for example, their dollar value, they wouldn't be able to be awarded. It would go to the next responsive and responsible bidder. This does not max out. Chilmar's pre-qualified dollar value is really high. They're in like the $30 million-ish range, somewhere around in there. Like they're really significant. I will say that it tends to swap between them and Nichols. Our elevators tend to be one or the other. In this case, Chilmar got a lot of them, but you'll see like the next agenda might be that Nichols gets a bunch. Like that just tends to be how they. Once Chilmar gets enough, though, their numbers will start going up, and Nichols will be the next one, and that's how it kind of works out.
Are either of these maybe weebies?
They are not, however, they have goals that they have to achieve within the contract. Neither one of them are certified MBE WBs.
Okay.
Not as
See,
primes, at least.
See, I told you I was going to have deeply intellectual questions around these. Shows them sending operations to teaching and learning. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Katie. Keep going.
No problem, no problem. The next award is 15.4. The Chief Operating Officer requests the board's approval of a competitively solicited contract to Chilmar Corporation in the amount of $537,188. And this is for elevator replacement services at Billie Holiday Elementary School.
I thought Billie Holiday was really reasonably new. Is it not?
It was a renovation project, and the renovation project did not include the elevator, unfortunately. And the elevator now does not work.
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
Next.
Section 15.5. The Chief Operating Officer requests the board's approval of a competitively solicited contract to Chilmar Corporation in the total amount of $502,088. And this contract provides elevator replacement services at Highlandtown Pre-K to 8 school.
We're good.
Section 15.6. The Chief Operating Officer requests the board's approval of a competitively solicited contract with Chilmar Corporation in the total amount of $502,088. Oh,
I think we have a duplicate.
we do. Apologies.
Yeah, Highlandtown, 237.
I just want to
It's the
check.
same Highlandtown, so it's not.
Yeah.
Make sure you didn't mean the other one.
So that may be a error. Apologies.
No worries.
So these section numbers may change for the full board meeting. Section 15.7, Chilmar Corporation. The Chief Operating Officer requests the board's approval of a competitively solicited contract with Chilmar Corporation in the total amount of $543,668. And this contract provides elevator replacement services at Digital Harbor High School.
Got it.
Section 15.8, the Chief Operating Officer requests the board's approval of a competitively solicited contract with Smolin Emmer Ilkovich Architects in the amount of $3,196,223. And this is to provide architectural and engineering services for the replacement at City Springs Pre-K to 8 school.
Got nothing.
Section 15.9, the Chief Operating Officer requests the board's approval of a competitively solicited contract with Clyde McHenry in the total amount of $3,086,536. And this contract provides window and door replacement services at Johnson Square Pre-K to 5 school.
I love to see new doors. It's great. Doors with locks.
Section 1510, the Chief Operating Officer requests the board's approval of a competitively solicited contract with E. Pikianis Construction Company in the total amount of $2,565,540. And this is to provide window and door replacement services at Liberty Elementary School.
No questions.
Okay. And finally, section 1511, the Chief Operating Officer requests the board's approval of a competitively solicited contract with TCA Architects. And this is in the total amount of $1,051,455. And this is to provide architectural and engineering services for the CTE renovations of Edmondson West Side High School.
Thank you for that. No questions, and thank you for entertaining the ones that I did have. So.
Oh, no problem. Thank you very much. They're good
All right.
questions.
Good, thank you. All
Just a
righty.
question. Will these be passed along to the operations committee to review, even though they're not meeting, just to vet them before our board meeting?
Yes. Yeah, we can make sure that they get a copy.
It's
But
important.
they probably already.
They have the greater context. They probably have heard or know about the grand elevator plan. I don't know, but they will scrutinize it in a way that we may not, based on their committee. All righty. Thank you for making. I trust Jonathan and Dr. Judkins will make sure that they get those for review. And next up, we have public comment, which Dr. Judkins has already confirmed that there is no public comment for today. A reminder to the public that members of the public who would like to provide comment to this committee can do so by signing up the day of the meeting until the start of the meeting at 3:30. Up to 5 individuals will be given the opportunity to provide comment to the Teaching and Learning Committee. Speakers will be granted 3 minutes, and all public comments should address teaching and learning related issues. Go tell your friends, come talk to us. Individuals or groups interested in providing comment to the committee may sign up in one of 3 ways. You can email our office, publiccomment@bcps.k12.md.us, or you can call our board office at 443-642-4095, or you can visit the board office in person at 200 East North Avenue. Finally, the chat I should have read this earlier, but it doesn't matter. Finally, the chat function during our virtual meetings is not used as a tool for gathering feedback or answering questions from the public. All righty. Thank you for joining us today. Our next meeting is May 6th, and we will be focused on summer and hear from a presentation on public charter schools. Thanks again for joining us, and the meeting is adjourned.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.